A world without maps. How humans found their way. Something about this place feels right. Not certain, just right. The slope of the ground. The way the air moves through the low trees to the east. The sound of water somewhere just past where you can see. You have been here before, or somewhere close to it, and your body knows it even when your mind hasn't finished deciding. You are moving. You have been moving, and for a moment, just a moment, you are not entirely sure which way leads back. Wherever you are as you listen tonight, if you enjoy this kind of calm storytelling, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. If you genuinely enjoy it, leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see where these quiet moments are being shared. Now let that small uncertainty settle into you gently. Not as worry, just as awareness. The world around you is large, and you are in it, and you know more than you think you do. Let your breathing slow. There is no need to rush toward anything. You are already here. The first thing you learn is not direction. It is place. A clearing where the grass grows differently. A flat stone beside the river with a particular crack running through it. A tree with 3 trunks growing from one root. These are not signs made by anyone. They are simply where they are. And over time, your mind collects them the way water collects in low places, without deciding to, without effort. There was someone who traveled with you before, an older person, not old in any broken way, just seasoned, someone who had walked these landscapes more seasons than you had. They never explained anything directly. They would stop, and you would stop with them, and they would look at something, a particular hill, a bent tree, the way a stream cut through soft ground, and then they would move on, and without words, something passed between you. The shape of the hill, the position of the bent tree relative to where you had started. You took it in because they looked at it, and looking at things together is how this kind of knowledge moves. That person is not with you today. But they are here in what you know. You have followed the river upstream this morning, or at least that is what it feels like. The water ran cold against your ankles when you crossed, and the current pressed lightly at your legs from the right side, which means the river flows from somewhere to the left, downhill, southward. You noted it without naming it. The body just keeps that kind of information. Now the river is behind you, and the land has opened up. Shorter grass, scattered stones, the sound of wind moving more freely without trees to interrupt it. The sky overhead is wide, and the sun stands well above the horizon, still climbing, still morning, its light coming from low in the east and casting your shadow long across the ground to the west. That shadow is useful. You know this the way you know most things out here, because you have watched it enough times that it has become part of how you understand where you are. You turn slightly, adjusting. The shadow shifts. You align yourself and continue. The open ground is easy to cross but easy to get lost in. When there are trees, you have things to aim at. When the land is flat and wide and full of nothing but pale grass and the distant line of hills, the tendency is to drift. You have done it before. Everyone does. You start walking in what feels like a straight line, and the land gradually curves you, the way water curves around an obstacle, and by the time you notice you are 40 steps from where you meant to be. The hills to the north are your anchor now. A ridgeline that looks like a hand laid flat with 3 fingers raised, 2 small peaks and 1 taller one, and you have seen that shape from enough different places to know how to use it. Not as a destination, as a reference. When it is directly to your right, you are moving roughly east. When it disappears behind a rise in the ground, you wait for high ground and look for it again. Early humans likely used prominent ridgelines and peaks for exactly this kind of bearing, not as navigational tools in any formal sense, but as familiar shapes whose position told them something about where they were. You find a slight rise in the ground and stop on it for a moment. Look back the way you came. The river is visible as a darker line of trees in the middle distance. Ahead, the grass continues, and the hills are there on the right where they should be. Good. You are where you thought you were. More or less. You keep moving. The path you are following is not a path anyone made. It is a path of least resistance, the way the ground naturally funnels movement around a wet depression, through a gap between two stands of dense brush along the gentle slope that avoids both the steeper bank above and the boggy ground below. Animals walk it. Probably they walked it before you did. The grass is pressed down in a way that no single morning can explain. You walk in that press, not because someone told you to, because the ground is easier there and something in your memory has registered that this easier ground runs in a useful direction. Wayfinding at this level is barely conscious. It is more like attention without language. The body making 1,000 small adjustments, a step to the left around a wet patch, a pause to check the sun, a turn of the head toward a sound in the brush to the right, and none of it narrated, none of it decided in any formal way. The sound in the brush is a small thing. A bird? Maybe. Maybe not. You pause and listen, and it does not repeat. You continue. The sun has moved. This is always the thing. You look up, and it is not where you expected it to be, and you realize that time has passed. More than you knew, or less, it is hard to say exactly. The light is higher now, and slightly harder, the shadows shorter, pointing less dramatically across the ground. Midday is not far off, and midday means the sun will be at its highest point, nearly south in the sky from where you stand, and for a while it will give you less directional information. The shadows will be short and pointing almost straight down from whatever casts them. This is the part of the day that requires patience. You find a place to stop, not camp, just a place to be still for a while. There is a low cluster of rocks, warm from the morning light, and you settle against them and let your breathing come down. You eat a little of what you are carrying. You watch the land. It is quieter than morning. The insects are louder, or maybe just more noticeable now that the bird chorus has finished. A small lizard has come out onto the flat face of the stone beside you and is doing what lizards do in the midday, holding still, absorbing. It does not seem bothered by you. You have learned to be unbothered by it either. Small creatures staying near you in stillness means the area is undisturbed. It is not a thought exactly, more like a background confirmation. There is a hawk circling high to the east. Below it, very far away, something is moving through the grass. A small group of animals, deer perhaps, or something larger. They are moving north and slightly west, which is toward water. You know there is water in that direction because you have been in that direction before, and because animals in the afternoon, when they begin to move after the midday heat, tend to move toward water. That is useful to know, even if you are not going that way today. When you traveled with a group, this kind of knowing multiplied. One person watching the south while another watched the north. One who had been this way 2 seasons ago remembering something you had forgotten. One who noticed the bird go quiet when you were too focused on the ground to notice anything except your own feet. Group travel was not just about safety. It was a way of accumulating more of the world at once than any single pair of eyes and one memory could hold. You have done most of this journey alone. but you are not, in any real sense, alone in your knowledge. The places you know partly because someone showed you where to look. The crossings you trust partly because you watched someone else cross them first. Navigation at this level is not only a personal skill, it is a shared one, passed down through movement and attention and the quiet instruction of simply going somewhere together. You think of this without nostalgia. It is just true. The land holds your memory and other people helped you put it there. A short distance to the west, the land begins to slope down, and the slope is consistent, not the erratic rise and fall of rocky ground, but the smooth, steady descent that usually means a drainage. A valley. Water somewhere at the bottom. You did not plan to go that way, but the slope pulls gently, and you let it. Research suggests that following drainage patterns, valleys, creek beds, dry arroyos, was one of the most reliable ways early humans moved through unfamiliar terrain. Water finds the easiest path through land, and the channels it makes through centuries of passage become natural corridors. The valley, when you reach it, is narrow and cool. A creek runs through the bottom of it, small and clear, no louder than a murmur. Willows and alder crowd the banks. Insects hover over the still places. A larger animal has been here recently. You can see where the mud at the water's edge has been disturbed, a depression that has not yet filled. You drink. Cold water, moving fast even if it sounds slow. When you stand up again, you orient yourself along the valley. The creek is flowing to your left, which means downhill, which means the water is going somewhere lower. If you follow it downstream, you will eventually reach larger water, the river, or another valley, or a place you have been. If you go upstream, you will find the source, smaller, higher, maybe easier to cross. For now, you stay in the valley. It feels sheltered. The sun is visible through a gap in the willows, still slightly past its highest point. Moving toward afternoon. The creek bends. You have been following it for long enough that you are past the part you recognized, and the valley is getting slightly narrower. The walls on either side steeper. Not dangerously steep, just close. You have not been here before, or if you have, it was long enough ago that nothing looks specifically familiar. This is fine. You do not panic about this. Uncertainty in the middle of travel is not an emergency. It is just information, the information that you are in new ground. And you should be more careful, and you should pay more attention. The attention sharpens naturally. You notice the rock type changes slightly. The flat gray stones give way to a rougher brown red stone that crumbles at the edges. You notice a large pine on the right bank of the creek, taller than the others. Its top broken off at some point, the break old and weathered to gray wood. You make a note of it, in whatever way the mind makes notes without language. If you come back through here, that pine will be a signal. Here is where the rock changes. Here is where you were not sure, and found your way anyway. You also notice the smell of the water changing. Upstream, it smelled clean, cold stone and moving water. Now there is something slightly different in it, a faint vegetal quality, the smell of still water or slower water somewhere ahead. This might mean the valley widens, which means the water spreads and slows. That could mean boggy ground, difficult to cross. Or it could mean a small lake or pond, which is a different kind of resource entirely. You slow your pace. The creek continues to run. You follow it, but carefully now, watching the ground for the soft places where your weight might sink unexpectedly. The ground stays firm. The smell was the wider valley you suspected, not a bog but a widening of the channel, the creek spreading into a braided section where it divides into 3 or 4 shallow threads across a gravel flat. Easy to cross, the valley opens at the same point, and ahead the walls recede and the light is bright and open again. Toward late afternoon, the valley opens again. The walls fall back, the creek widens slightly, and beyond the tree line ahead you can see the light is different, brighter, more horizontal, the golden color that comes when the sun is dropping and its angle changes. Open ground. A meadow, maybe, or the edge of the forest. You push through the last of the alders and stop. It is a wide clearing, and in the far corner of it, where the tree line curves to the left, there is a low rocky outcropping that you recognize immediately and completely, not with any thought, just a sudden settling of recognition. That outcropping. You have sat against it, you have slept beside it. The rock is pale gray with a stripe of darker stone running through it diagonally, and the grass around the base of it is softer than the rest of the meadow because the rock catches rain and channels it down to the roots. You are not lost. You were simply somewhere you had not been in a while. And now you are back to somewhere you know. That feeling. Not triumph, not even particular relief, just a quiet settling. Like something that was slightly wrong is now correct. The sun is getting low. You can feel it in the air more than see it, the temperature dropping just slightly. A change in how the light falls, the shadows growing longer and more directional. When the shadows are long again, they are useful again. They point east in the evening, roughly, and the sun pulls your attention back toward direction. You are at the edge of the meadow now, moving along the tree line. This is a habit you have noticed in yourself. When you are uncertain, you tend to follow edges. The edge of the forest and the open ground. The edge of the water and a bank. The edge of the hill and the valley floor. These edges are safer, you can see in multiple directions, you have shelter on one side and visibility on the other. The edge here curves gradually north, and that is the direction you want, toward the place where the ground rises and there is good shelter and you have spent nights before. You follow the curve. The light shifts quickly at this hour. What was gold becomes amber, then something deeper. The shadows run long and thin across the meadow grass. Birds are moving differently now, not the random circling of the afternoon, but purposeful movements, direct lines toward roosting places. A flock of something small rises from the far end of the meadow and crosses above you and lands in the trees to the northwest. They know something about the direction of the good perches. You watch them for a moment, then look at the sky. The sky is layered, blues and oranges and a deepening gray blue above, and the light coming from the west now is not from the sun directly but from below it, bouncing up off something far away and unseen. The clouds, if there are clouds, catch that light and hold it longer than the land does. You know roughly where west is from the sky. You know roughly where north is from the ridge you can see darkening against the lighter sky. You know roughly where you are from the rock outcropping you just left behind. Roughly. That word is important. Everything out here is roughly. You navigate by accumulation, by layering one rough estimate onto another until the general direction becomes clear enough to move in. No single reading of the sun or the shadow or the ridgeline tells you exactly where you are, but together they narrow the uncertainty to something manageable. You are near shelter. You can feel the land rising slightly underfoot. The trees ahead are changing, the soft alder of the creek bottom giving way to something older and denser, the smell of pine growing stronger. Pine trees on higher ground. Good drainage, firm footing. There is an animal path here. Pressed into the soil at the margin of the trees, just barely visible in the fading light, a narrow line where hooves have passed consistently, the grass flattened and the ground slightly compacted. Deer, probably. Or elk. Something that moves through here enough to make this small channel in the world. You follow it. Not blindly. You are still watching the sky, still feeling the slope of the ground, still checking that the ridge is where it should be. But the path makes it easier. It bends around obstacles you might have stumbled through in the growing dark. It finds the way that is already known, even if the knowledge belongs to creatures with different minds than yours. Research suggests that prehistoric humans regularly traveled along animal trails, particularly on the approach to sheltered areas near water. Animals are good at finding the efficient route, and the efficient route tends to be the safe route. The path curves right, then levels, and then you are among the rocks. You know this place completely. Not because it is remarkable in any way, it is just an overhang of stone, wide enough to sleep under, with a low flat section of ground below it that is sheltered from wind from 3 directions. There is a small depression in the ground where fire has been before, the stone around it blackened and cracked. There are no ashes now. The fire was long ago. You settle against the rock. The stone is still warm from the day's sun, which means it was in good light this morning and into the afternoon, south-facing, you know without thinking, which is why it is dry and why the ground here is drier than the ground 50 steps away in either direction. The sky is still light enough to read, but the land below it is darkening fast. You can see the meadow you crossed, a pale shape in the growing shadow, the line of trees along the creek, the far hills reduced to a silhouette. You know where all of those things are. You know how long it would take to reach them, and what you would find along the way and which parts are easy and which parts require attention. That knowledge is not written anywhere. It is in the body, in the soles of the feet and the habit of the eyes and the unconscious count of steps between one familiar place and the next. The stars come out slowly. First one, almost uncertain. Then another. Then more. Until the sky is full of them and the darkness on the ground is complete and the world has divided into 2 layers, the brilliant overhead and the near total dark of the land. Early humans likely used stars for navigation, though probably not with the systematic accuracy we sometimes imagine. More likely, certain stars, particularly bright ones, or the groupings that moved predictably, served as rough bearings for long travel, the way the hills did by day. You know one cluster well. It rises in the east in the hours before dawn and stays in roughly the same position relative to north through the night. Others shift. Others turn in a slow arc across the sky. The one you know stays where it is, not perfectly, but reliably enough to be trusted. Tonight it is hidden behind cloud. This happens. You note it without frustration. Tomorrow will give you other information. Tonight you have shelter, and you know where you are, and that is enough. You pull the warmth of the place around you. Sometime in the night, the cloud breaks. You do not fully wake. You are in that half place between sleep and attention where the senses continue working but the mind does not fully engage with what they bring in. You notice light. The shelter is slightly brighter than the inside of your eyes. You notice the air has changed. Less still, a breath of something drier moving through. You sleep. The morning comes with birds. First one, somewhere in the trees above. Then more, in a cascade that is not chaotic, each species adding its voice in a particular sequence that has something to do with the light, with temperature, with what the morning means for their particular movement through the day. You lie still for a while and let the birds tell you things. The ones in the trees directly above are not alarmed. No sharp warning calls, no sudden silence and flush. The meadow is quiet. Whatever was moving out there in the night has moved on. You sit up. The sky to the east is pale and brightening. The sun is not yet visible, but its position is completely clear from the quality of the light. It will rise slightly south of directly east, which means this is not the height of summer, which means you have some cold mornings still ahead of you, or behind you, depending on which part of the year this is. The fire depression is cold and bare. You do not start one this morning. There is enough light coming, and the morning is not so cold that it matters, and you want to move while the light is still useful, and the dew is still on the grass, and the ground is still soft enough to show you where things have walked in the night. You find where the deer slept. A pressed oval in the long grass at the edge of the meadow, still slightly warm when you press your palm to it. The ground around it shows two clear sets of prints, one large, one slightly smaller, heading north toward the tree line. Deer settle where they can see in multiple directions and escape in multiple others. They prefer ground that is slightly elevated, where the air drainage is good and approaching things can be heard from a distance. That this hollow is where they chose tells you the air is coming from the north, the direction their noses would have been pointing. And that last night was still enough that sound traveled well. You file all of this away without needing it for anything immediate. This is just how the world talks, and you have learned to listen. Your own path today will take you northeast toward the river crossing you know, and then further along the ridge toward the place where the hunting is better in this season. You know this not because you calculated it, but because you have done it enough times that the pattern is part of how you understand where you are in the year. But first, there's the question of which way to leave the shelter. You know two routes from here. One drops directly down the north slope, steep for the first section, and brings you out onto the open ground below quickly. The other traverses east before descending, longer but gentler, and passes a known water source and a section of land where you have found useful materials before. The steep way is faster in good conditions. The long way is better when you are not in a hurry, or when you want to see more of the land before committing to a direction. Today you are not in a hurry. You take the long way. The traverse east is pleasant in the morning light. The slope is in shadow still, the sun not high enough to reach it, and the cool air in the shadow is sharp and good. Dew on everything, the grass, the low brush, the spiderweb strung between the stalks and now made visible by the water clinging to the silk. You watch where you step. In dew like this, you can see exactly where things have walked in the night, and you read the ground as you move through it. A large cat came through here. Not recently, the prints have softened slightly at the edge as the dew settled into the disturbed soil. The track line is easy to follow, a direct, efficient path, each print placed with precision, the spacing even and deliberate. The cat was not hunting, just traveling. You know the feeling. You note it and move on. The morning walk is different from the afternoon walk. Everything is clearer. The shadows are long and point west, which confirms the sun coming from the east. The air is sharp, and the details of things are precise in the early light. The individual blades of grass, the lichen pattern on a stone, the exact color of the bark on the near pines. Later in the day, everything will flatten slightly in the overhead light. Now it is all edge and angle and distinction. You move through the trees to the northeast. The ground is soft with old needles and the walking is quiet. You notice the trees thinning slightly ahead, which could mean the edge of the forest, or a clearing, or higher ground with different growth. You slow and pay attention. It is higher ground. A low ridge. From the top of it you can see down into a second valley, narrower than the one you walked yesterday, and you can see the glint of water through the trees at the bottom. More importantly, you can see the larger river beyond, a wide flat shine in the low morning light, moving north. You know this river. You know where it comes from and where it goes, roughly. You know where it is crossable and where it is not. You know the places along it where the bank is undercut, and the places where the gravel shelf reaches out into the current and you can walk halfway across before the water reaches your knees. The crossing you want is about a half-morning's walk downstream from where you can see the river now. You orient yourself, note the sun, note the ridgeline to the northwest, note the angle of the valley below you, and begin the descent. Coming down is always easier than going up. The body moves faster, the ground falls away. The legs work differently. Less effort but more control required. The weight wanting to rush ahead and the muscles working to keep the balance. You pick your line down the slope, not straight but angled, traversing the steeper sections diagonally. At the bottom, the trees are different. Cottonwood, pale and soft, their leaves turning when the air moves. The ground is damp and springy. You can hear the water clearly now, and it sounds different from yesterday's creek. Not a murmur, but a consistent low-pitched sound, the sound of volume, of depth. The river comes into view through a gap in the trees, and it is wider than you remembered, or wider than it was when you last came this way. This sometimes happens in a wet season, or after rain somewhere upstream. The current looks faster too, more white on the surface, small eddies at the edge where the flow meets the still water near the bank. You walk downstream along the bank, looking for the crossing. You find it where you remembered it. The gravel shelf extends out from the near bank, and on the far side the bar continues almost to mid-river. The gap in the middle, the actual deep, fast section, is perhaps 20 feet. You know from experience that the water there will come to your chest. You know the current pushes hard from upstream, so you must angle downstream, not fight it. This is not fearlessness. You are careful. You watch the far bank for a moment, look upstream for any sign of something coming, logs, debris, and find nothing. The ford looks as it should look. You wade in. The cold is startling. Always. It doesn't matter how many times. The cold of moving water at depth is a physical fact that arrives before any mental preparation for it. You catch your breath. Your feet find the gravel, each step uncertain until it is certain. The current presses at your legs, and you angle with it, let it carry you partly across while your feet make their way through the shallows on the other side. You come out onto the far bank, wet to the waist, breathing a little hard. You stand in a patch of morning sun and let the warmth work at the wet fabric. This will take a while. You are patient about it. The sun is good here, full and direct, and the bank is open enough that the air moves through. This is not wasted time. Waiting is part of travel. The body needs intervals. The eyes need time to stay in one place long enough to actually see it. You have noticed that the best information often comes when you are still, not moving toward anything, not reading the ground for the next step, just there, letting the world come to you. A kingfisher comes low along the river from upstream, brilliant and deliberate, and lands on a fallen branch 10 steps to your right. It looks at the water. You do not move. It dives, a sudden decisive thing, and comes up with something small and silver and beats it against the branch, and then it is gone, upstream before you have fully processed what you just saw. You look at the branch. The water below it is deep and clear. You file that away. Deep water here. Good fish water. The far side of the river feels different. It always does. Even when the land is similar, similar trees, similar birds, similar quality of soil, there is something in crossing a major landmark that changes the texture of the experience. You are on the other side of something. The way back is now an act. You are committed to a direction. The ridge you want is visible from here. Angled northeast, you can see the change in the tree line where the slope increases, the canopy lower and darker there, the species shifting to something harder and better adapted to the higher, drier conditions. You start toward it. The morning is well along now. The shadows have shortened from their long dawn positions and are moving toward the compressed midday shapes. You still have time before the sun reaches its highest point, but not much. You move at a steady pace, not hurrying, but not dawdling either. On the slope, you stop to listen. This is something you have done your whole life, though you could not tell anyone how you learned to do it. At certain points in unfamiliar terrain, you stop and go still and let the sounds settle into you, not analyzing them, not naming them, just letting the texture of the place come through sound. Wind in the upper branches. The creak of a branch somewhere to the left. A stream somewhere lower and behind you. A bird calling that is not a warning. A bird that is not calling, which means something in that direction that has silenced it. You look toward the silence. It is uphill and to the right, maybe 30 steps away, through denser undergrowth. You wait. Whatever it is not moving. Then slowly it does. A branch pushes aside, releases, and a deer steps out of the brush, stops, looks toward you with large, still eyes. You are still. The deer looks at you for a long moment. Its ears move, tilting forward, then back, then forward again, reading the air in multiple directions at once. Its nose works. It has smelled you, but it is not convinced. The wind has shifted slightly, coming now from the left, and perhaps what it smells is not quite enough to act on. You keep breathing slowly. The deer looks away, then looks back at you. Then, with a decision you cannot see being made, it lowers its head slightly and takes a step, and then another, and then it is moving uphill with the calm sureness of an animal that has decided you are not a threat. You breathe out. The upper slope is harder going. The ground is rockier, the soil shallower between the stones, the roots of trees crossing the surface in patterns that catch your feet if you are not paying attention. You slow down and watch the ground more carefully. This is a different kind of attention than the attention of the open meadow, more local, more immediate, less concerned with the horizon and more concerned with the next 2 steps. You are getting higher. You can feel it in the effort of the climb and in the way the view expands behind you when you turn to look. The valley you crossed this morning is visible, and the river is a line through it, and beyond that, the far hills you camped below last night. You have covered a reasonable distance. The ridge is close now. You can see the sky through the trees in a way that means an edge, the ground drops away on the other side, and the trees stop at the ridge crest, and the sky comes all the way down to the ground. You push through the last section of dense undergrowth, bending under low branches, and come out on top. The view from the ridge is not a surprise, but it still does something. You know what should be here. You have stood on this ridge or close to it before. But knowing and seeing are different, and the sight of the wide country spread below you, the river a silver line, the forests a dark green mass, the hills in every direction stacked against each other in diminishing blues and grays, this still requires a moment of just looking. You give it that moment. Then you start to orient. The river below and behind you, running north. The higher peaks to the northeast, which you have never reached but whose position tells you things. The low gap in the hills to the south that you know opens onto the long flat ground where the large herds come in the dry season. The smell of smoke from somewhere west, distant, possibly natural. You are here, specifically here, in a way that has nothing to do with words or symbols. The place is in you because you have moved through it, and you have moved through it enough times that the image of it from here is accurate, and complete, and useful. Early humans living in the same landscapes for generations would have accumulated this kind of spatial knowledge across entire lifetimes, and likely shared it through story and demonstration rather than any written system. You sit down on the ridge and eat a little and rest. From up here, you can also see the weather coming. To the northwest, past the high peaks, there is a line of cloud that was not there this morning. Low cloud, gray-blue at the bottom, which means it carries water. How far it is, how fast it moves, these are things you read from the way the cloud sits, from the rate at which its edge shifts against the mountains behind it, from the smell the wind carries from that direction when you turn your face into it. It is still dry. But the weather is building. You have enough time. The shelter is half a day from here. You will be under stone before whatever that cloud brings reaches this ridge. You make that calculation without hurry, and then you stop making it, because the calculation is done and the rest is just walking. The wind on the ridge is consistent. It comes from the northwest, steady and dry, and it makes the trees just below the crest murmur in a single direction. Wind is information. It tells you something about the weather coming from the northwest, and it tells you something about the time of year. In the cold season this wind bites. In the warm season it dries the land. Today it is mild. Not cold, not warm. The kind of wind that means nothing urgent. You watch a hawk below you, which is a strange and rare thing, being above a hawk, riding the updraft along the face of the ridge, barely moving its wings, tilting only slightly to change direction. It is watching the open slope below, patient in the way that efficient creatures are patient. You watch it until it tilts away south and disappears below the ridgeline. Then you stand and begin to move east along the ridge. The ridge walk is the easiest kind of walking. The ground is clear and the view is constant and the direction is obvious. You simply follow the high ground, and the high ground tells you where it wants to go. The trees here are sparse, and the ones that survive are low and wind-shaped, bent permanently in the direction the prevailing wind comes from. You can read the history of the wind in the shape of every tree on this ridge. You have been walking the ridge for a long time when you notice the land beginning to drop in a way that means the ridge is ending, or changing direction. Ahead, the ground falls more sharply to the right, and the left ridge merges with a slope that descends northeast. This is where you leave the ridge. The descent here is long and gradual, through a pine forest that grows denser as you go lower, the trees taller and older, the canopy closing above you and reducing the light to something filtered and green. The forest smells of resin and damp earth. The sound of wind disappears as you descend below the ridge crest and the trees absorb everything. In deep forest, direction comes from other things. The moss grows thicker on the north face of stones. Not always, not perfectly, but often enough to be useful. The large trees lean slightly toward the light, which in this forest comes from the south, which means the lean of the trunks tells you something about where south is. The drainage patterns, the small finger valleys and channels in the ground where water would run in a rain, all point in some general direction toward lower ground. Sound changes in deep forest. The wind that was audible on the ridge is gone, replaced by something more local, the movement of air through the understory. A different quality, softer, directional in ways that don't match the wind above the canopy. You have learned not to use the sound of wind in dense forest to orient yourself. It bounces off trunks, funnels through gaps, comes from directions that have nothing to do with the actual weather. But there are other sounds. Water always tells the truth. The land always drains downhill. If you are quiet enough to hear a stream, you know that water is lower than you are, and that gives you an axis, not a compass bearing, but a dimension. Higher and lower. That is always true. The smell of the forest changes with direction in ways that are harder to describe. Wet ground smells different from dry ground. South-facing slopes smell different from north-facing ones. Warmer, drier, sometimes a slight resin quality where the sun has been pulling at the bark of the conifers. You navigate partly by smell in places where you cannot see far, and you do not think about it as navigation. It is just what the air tells you about what is nearby. You are not lost. But you are in the part of travel where you rely more on accumulated knowledge than on visible landmarks. You know this forest, not every tree, not every step, but the general logic of it, the way it thickens and thins, the places where the old growth gives way to younger, lighter stands, which means a clearing was here once, or a fire, or an opening the trees haven't fully reclaimed. Your feet find the path again, the animal path, a different one from yesterday's, but the same kind, faint, consistent, the ground slightly different from the forest floor around it in ways that your feet feel before your eyes see. You follow it. The forest opens onto a long, thin meadow in late afternoon. Not wide, maybe 50 steps across, but stretching a long way north and south. A seep meadow, probably water just barely below the surface keeping the trees out, the grass a slightly different green from the drier meadow you crossed yesterday morning. Sedge and rush at the edges. Small tracks everywhere in the soft ground at the margins. You have been in this meadow before. You know it from the shape of it, the way it bends slightly south at the far end, and the way the tree line on the east side has a gap in it that frames a particular view of the hills. That gap, that framing, yes. You stopped there once and looked through it and saw the distant peak that is always slightly paler than the others because its upper slopes are open rock. You are about a morning's walk from where you started this whole journey. That recognition settles in you with something close to satisfaction. Not triumph, just the quiet pleasure of having moved through a large piece of the world and found your way through it and come back to a known place from an unfamiliar direction. You cross the meadow slowly. The ground is soft, and the grass is high enough to brush your hands as you walk. The light is going gold again. Late afternoon, the reliable amber that comes before the sun gets too low. You can see your shadow clearly in the grass, long, pointing east, which confirms the sun is low in the west and you are moving north, roughly, which is where you want to be. The seep meadow holds insects in a cloud near the sedge edges. Something about the particular soft smell of a meadow like this, the way the grass holds the warmth of the day while the air above it starts to cool, it is the smell of a good place. Not dangerous ground. Not difficult ground. Just ground that knows how to hold life quietly. A pair of cranes at the far end of the meadow. They stand very still in the tall sedge, and then, when you are perhaps 100 steps from them, they begin their slow, deliberate retreat. Not flushing, not panicking, just walking backward into the reeds with a dignity that makes you feel watched in return. You stop. They stop. You wait. They resume their slow vanishing. You continue north. There is a moment in every day's travel when the body shifts, not dramatically. But there is a point in the late afternoon when the day stops feeling like forward movement and starts feeling like return. The energy does not drop. If anything, you often walk faster in the hours before shelter, because the goal is close and the light is still good enough to use. But the orientation changes. You are not covering unknown ground. You are closing the distance to a known place, and that is a different quality of movement. You are in that shift now. The ground is familiar, getting more familiar with each rise and each descent. The smell of the pines here is the specific smell of the pines near the shelter. Something in the soil, maybe, or the particular age and density of these trees that gives them a slightly different quality from the pines in the valley below. You have smelled your way home before, though you would not phrase it that way. There are times you have traveled by water. Not often, but there are stretches of coastline you know, places where the land ends and the wide water begins, and the shoreline becomes its own kind of corridor. Walking a coast is different from walking the interior. There is always one certain thing: the water is on one side. That single fixed edge removes a large part of the uncertainty that comes with open ground or dense forest. But the coast has its own confusions. The tides change the edge. What was firm ground at dawn is underwater by midday. What looked like a passable headland at low water becomes a wall at high. You learn to read the water, the color of it, the sound, the smell of the air coming off it, the way you learn to read the land. And the coast teaches you something the forest cannot. Things can move very far and still come back. The same birds. The same tide marks on familiar rocks. The same particular shape of a headland you have walked around before, reappearing from a direction you did not expect because you came at it differently this time. You have returned to places you thought you would never see again. This is one of the surprises of moving through the world without fixed plans. The return is rarely the way you imagined it. You do not usually come back by the same path. You come back by something close to the same path, adjusted by what you found along the way, and the return has its own texture, its own small discoveries. Today, there is no coastline. You are in the inland country, and the hills and forest and river are your references. But the coast is there, somewhere, a weight on the edge of what you know, the birds that come from that direction, the quality of the air on certain mornings when the wind has traveled over water before it reaches you. The world is connected. You know this not philosophically but practically. The river flows to somewhere. The birds come from somewhere. The wind carries information from places you have never been. You are here, in this particular piece of land. And that is enough. The light is going. You can feel the day ending in a way that is distinct from just the lowering sun. There is something in the air. A slight release of tension. A turning of the world toward the hours that will require less movement. You are moving toward a place you know. You can feel the distance left in your body, the rough estimate of how much further the ground must slope before the trees change, and the familiar rock formation comes into view. You move through the last of the light. The trees close in again, briefly, a finger of forest reaching into a low place between two rises in the ground. The dark here comes faster than in the open, the canopy filtering out the last horizontal light. You walk by texture as much as sight, your feet reading the ground, the slope, the surface. And then the forest releases you. The place you know is ahead, the rock outcropping you have used before, not the same one as last night, but one you have returned to many times. It is on slightly raised ground with a clear view south, and the stone holds heat well, and there is a spring not far downslope that runs year-round. Cold and clean, you come to it the way you always come to it, from slightly west and below, so that you see its silhouette against the remaining sky before you see it in full. The shape is right, exactly right, the particular angle of the highest point, the shelf of rock that juts out from the left side, the scrubby juniper that has grown close against the base on the right. You settle here, not with drama, just with the practical act of arriving and putting down what you are carrying and finding the best position against the warm stone. The stone radiates the heat of the day slowly. The sky above is still deep blue, not quite dark, the first stars just becoming visible in the places where the blue is deepest. You drink from the spring before the last light goes. The water is cold and clear, and you can hear it moving even when you cannot see it, a small, steady sound that has been here far longer than you have, and will be here long after. You drink slowly, the world settles around you. From where you sit, you can see the silhouette of the hills you walked today. The ridge is a dark line against the sky, and you can trace from memory the path you took along it, where the ground dropped to the right, where the trees thinned, where the hawk was circling below. All of that is still in you, added to everything else that was already there. The weather from the northwest arrived softer than it looked from the ridge. Not rain, just a low overcast moving across, thinning in places, the clouds lit faintly from behind by whatever light remains in the west. The air has cooled, a good sleeping temperature. This is the map, not a drawing, not a symbol. The map is the experience, accumulated over years of moving through the same country, learning it the way water learns a channel, by moving through it again and again until the pattern is worn into something permanent and reliable. You sit with that for a while. The stars, where they show through the cloud, come and go. There is nothing to figure out tonight. The questions of the day, which way, how far, what landmark, where to cross, have all been answered by moving, and the answers are stored somewhere below language, waiting for the next time they are needed. You did not always know where you were going. You did not always know exactly where you were, but you kept moving in a direction that accumulated information, and the information became enough, and enough became more than enough, and eventually the familiar came back. That is the whole thing, really. Not certainty. Not a grid. Not a symbol on a surface that tells you here and there and the line between them. Just the practiced, patient accumulation of knowing. This stone, this ridge, this river running this direction in this kind of light, until the world feels like something you are inside rather than something you are trying to figure out. It occurs to you, in the loose way that thoughts arrive before sleep, that you have never been without direction. Even in the moments today when you were not certain which way to go, you were still oriented, still in relationship to the land. The uncertainty was not blankness, it was a question the land was about to answer. You kept moving, and it answered. A sound in the trees, something small and nocturnal, beginning its night. You notice it. You do not need to investigate. The warmth of the stone behind you, the smell of juniper. Your breathing has slowed. You may not have noticed it happening, but somewhere between the last clear thought and now, the breath came down to something very quiet. Not shallow, deep and full, just slower. The body knows when the day is over, the stars are brilliant tonight. The cloud from last night has cleared entirely, and the sky is open and deep. The kind of depth that you can only really see when there is no other light. The cluster you know, the reliable one, the one that stays roughly north, is there, sharp and clear. You could, if you needed to, orient yourself entirely by those stars. Stand up, take a bearing, know which way to walk in the dark. But you do not need to. You are already where you need to be. The spring sounds in the dark below. The warmth of the day still in the stone. The body grows heavy. Not the wrong kind of heavy. The right kind, the settled weight of a body that has moved well through the world and wants now to be still. The legs are tired but not sore. The feet know the ground they walked, the eyes have done their work, you are still aware of things. The star cluster, north, the ridge, that direction, the river behind and below, the meadow, the crossing, the fire depression in the shelter, all of it held in the soft dark of knowing without looking. You let it be there, not as something to organize, just as the world itself, waiting. The night deepens around you. The sounds change with the hours. First the birds go quiet. Then the insects change their tone, the daytime hum replaced by something lower and more rhythmic. Later, in the deep hours, even that will slow. The world at its most still, you are between sleep and waking. You are in the place you were trying to reach, and you are in the state your body was moving toward all day. And these two things have arrived together in the dark on the warm stone. The North Star, steady. The juniper, still. Your breath, slower. Let it all grow quiet now. The land you walk today is still there, patient. It will be there tomorrow. The river will still be running, the ridge will still stand, the animal path will still run where it always has, and in the morning you will know again, from the light and the sound and the feel of the ground, exactly where you are. But right now, there is no need to know anything. The stone is warm, the sky is full. The body knows where it is. Let the rest go. Let it all go. Quiet now. Still.